Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the preview of the second week in the AUDL. I'm Ben, and joining me we have James and Andrew. So first off, we're going to discuss this week's ESPN3 game of the week, and that is the Seattle Cascades versus the San Francisco Flamethrowers. Now, since I'm the West Division analyst, I will just give you a brief summary of this game. So now, Seattle is a very, very fluid team on offense. They're very fun to watch. There was a video of them on Twitter by the AUDL this week, and it showed them basically just destroying the defense with 3 beautiful hucks. So we'll leave it at that. Seattle has a good offense. Secondly, San Francisco also has good offense. So that proves anything. Bring out your guns, because they'll be lit. So, San Francisco has a bunch of new talent this year. They brought in a bunch of players from the San Jose region and all across the country, really. They're just stacked. And they didn't really lose anyone this offseason either. Seattle is also pretty set. They didn't lose a bunch of people last year either. They didn't really gain on it, but then again, they were second in the division last year, so what do you really need to gain on? San Francisco was third that last year, and I'm picking them as the number 1 and number 2 seed to finish this year. So I think this is going to be a very good match, very high scoring, and I also think that Seattle's going to come out on top. Just kidding. San Francisco's going to come out on top in this one. I'm not going to put a scoreline out there just because it might be that high. So, James, if you'd like to comment on that, you might as well.
Well, frankly, I agree with your pick. I'm picking San Francisco. They've only played 1 week. I know San Francisco's starting off 2-0, Seattle 1-0. I'm pretty sure last year Seattle was number 1 offense in the West. I think San Fran was number 1 defense in the West. Personally, with me, it's always defense wins championships. And then, like you said, a bunch of new players. Yeah, personally for me, I pick San Francisco, but I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle comes out with the win. It definitely wouldn't be an upset to me. Definitely wouldn't be an upset. But to me, San Francisco, I'm going to pick to win this game.
Okay, and Andrew?
I'm shaking my head, guys. I'm going to go with Seattle all the way because, Seattle's got enough. They score a lot of points every game. San Fran played 2 games back-to-back last weekend. I know that's probably not a big factor, but 2 games in 2 days is kind of rough on the legs. I know a week is enough time for them to recover, but I still expect to be some tired legs, some worn-out legs. So I think Seattle's going to win. I know it'll be a close game, so I'm going to be the different pick here and go with Seattle.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And once again this week, we're going to have our competition between the 3 of us to see who can get the most right on the AUDL Pick'em. And whoever loses gets to wear a sign that basically humiliates them during the review, which will come out next Tuesday. It'll be Andrew this time, I think, going with Seattle there. All right, so we have 3 games in the South Division this week. So, James, tell us about those.
All right, so the first game we have is Atlanta hosting the Charlotte Express. Of course, Atlanta pulled a big win last week against the National Night Watch, a 10-point deficit, 26-16. Charlotte came close against Raleigh, but couldn't pull it out. 23-18, I think the score was. They lost to Raleigh. So you're talking about Atlanta right now 1-0, Charlotte 0-1. Frankly, Atlanta, they're still showing their defensive scheme that they had last year. Charlotte, I think, if anything, they showed their worth against Raleigh. They were able to get some breaks in there. They almost tied the game. At one point, was actually winning. So definitely a good game to call here. If you happen to be in the Atlanta area or if Atlanta's streaming their games, try to look at it. It might be a good game to watch. Frankly, my pick here is Atlanta. I think Charlotte has a good game going for them, but I just don't see them beating Atlanta, and definitely not at home, where Atlanta definitely is strong. If Atlanta has definitely a good second half team where they may not start off good in the first half, but in the second half, you need to watch out for them, and Charlotte wants a chance to win. they need to, go all the way through. So my pick is Atlanta. Charlotte, I expect them to show a good game, but I'm going to pick Atlanta at home. The next game is Dallas at Austin. Rematch from last week, except for Austin this time's at home. Last week, Dallas just embarrassed Austin 30-18. Now we're in Austin. And even though Austin is at home, I got to pick Dallas for this. And this is actually going to be my lock of the week, guys. So I am guaranteeing a Dallas win here. My lock of the week, Dallas over Austin. I'm not picking the score, but I'm going to pick Dallas here over Austin. Might be a good game to watch. I think Dallas streams their game, but that might just be at home. So, and the last game, Jacksonville at Raleigh. The rematch from last year, if you guys watched the divisional championship in the South, Jacksonville versus Raleigh. You got Raleigh, a good offensive team, versus Jacksonville. Jacksonville is one of those other teams that comes in the second half. And Raleigh, they just came too close against Charlotte last week, definitely. And I know we're all excited to see Jacksonville. Personally, I am. But and this might surprise some of y'all, but I'm actually going to pick Jacksonville to win this game over Raleigh. So expect Jacksonville to start 1-0 and Raleigh to be 1-1. So my picks are Atlanta, Dallas, and Jacksonville.
Okay, so James has that the first lock of the week called with Dallas over Austin. So now there's 4 games in the Midwest this week. So let's go over to Andrew with that.
All right, first our lock for the week. My lock for the week this week is going to be Madison versus Minnesota. I know it's Ben's team, but Madison at home has not lost ever. So I mean, you can't pick against Madison at home. They guard their territory well. Minnesota isn't necessary. Minneapolis doesn't have a great they have talent. They could potentially be a 500 team, but I'm not going to pick them to beat the Radicals at home. So that's my lock of the week. But the game to watch this week will definitely be Detroit-Pittsburgh. I know I said in our reviews from last week that if Detroit beats Pittsburgh, that they would not be necessarily a playoff contender. But it's still a good game to watch to tell where they'll finish in the Midwest. So even if Detroit loses this game and they lose by, say, 3 or 4 points, I would say that they're in the right direction. I say that they're a lot better than last year, and that other teams need to relook at that game and not take it as lightly as Cincinnati did in their first game. They got a better defensive squad than they did last year. They limited the Cincinnati Revolution to 12 points, and likewise, the Revolution held them to just 15. So I think for Detroit to win this game, they got to keep Pittsburgh under 13 points. They got to slow down their offense. I know their offense is really high-powered. They like to throw the disc different ways, and it's going to be a good game to watch. But the first game of the week is actually on Friday. So I have Cincinnati at Indianapolis, and that's going to be an interesting game to watch because I haven't really seen a whole lot of news from each of these teams other than Cincinnati losing to Detroit. So I'm going to pick Indianapolis in that game. So Saturday is the Detroit-Pittsburgh game and the Madison-Minneapolis game. And then Sunday, Chicago plays Minnesota again. So I'm going to pick, I don't know, I honestly, you could flip a coin with this one, but I'm going to go with Chicago. It's going to be tiresome for the wind chill to bounce back from a game again at Madison. 2 games in a row against a really tough team. And then I picked Chicago to finish 3rd in the Midwest, so I'm going to stand by my previews there. And we're going to go with Chicago to beat the wind chill. It'll be a pretty good game to watch, but I'm not going to put a point score on that one. Both teams have lost a lot, but I'm going to say Chicago is going to do enough to win the game.
Okay, Andrew with his lock of the week going with Madison over Minnesota. Breaks my heart, but in my defense, the last team to beat Madison in the Midwest Division, besides Pittsburgh, was actually Minnesota. So I'll just put that out there. So now we'll get to my West Division. Very good games in the West this week. The first game is actually what I'm going to do for my lock of the week. It's Seattle versus San Jose, and I'm going to have my lock on Seattle. San Jose has just lost too much. I mean, they still have a few players that they can work with, but honestly, they've lost so much that I can't go back to last year's stats and even compare them with this year. It's probably going to be a really tough ride for them this year after their dominance over the past couple of years. So Seattle, I'm going to pick with that one. The next game we have is, I don't like to call it the Battle of the Bottom Feeders, but kind of what it is. Even though there's no such thing as a bottom feeder in this West Division. Both these teams played very well against San Francisco last week. It's San Diego Growlers versus the Los Angeles Aviators. San Diego, of course, losing Jimmy Mickle at the end of last season over to Dallas. So that's a big blow to them. This is going to be a very close game. I don't really have any points that I see sticking out for either of these teams. So I expect it to be very close all the way. The only thing I can go by is last week they both forced San Francisco into overtime. So based on that, I can kind of say they're about even. And then the last game we have, which is the ESPN3 game of the week, it's Seattle versus San Francisco. We already talked about this. I picked San Francisco. Seattle is on the back end of their double game, facing San Jose the first night. I think San Francisco just has too much for them to handle. But like I said, it's going to be a very competitive game. All the games this week in the AUDL are very even, and I think it's going to be a great week to watch. So now in the East Division, there are 2 games this week. So let's bring it over to James for his input on those 2 games.
All right, so guys, in the East Division, we have Ottawa doing back-to-back away games on the 9th. They're facing the New York Empire, a consistent playoff team. I think they made the playoffs every single year since their inception. And also they're playing the DC Breeze, who's a former playoff team in their own right. New York, they've always made it to play Toronto in the playoffs and get destroyed, but that's another story. So their first game, this is the opening weekend for the Eastern Division, definitely. So this is their time to show themselves. Honestly, for this game, New York, consistent defensive team, the Dross brothers, that defensive duo right there, always has something to say to whatever team, especially at home. Ottawa, you're not hearing much about Ottawa this offseason, but a very consistent squad last year. I'm pretty sure they went 7-7, so a 500 record. But the New York Empire, who last year, pretty sure went 11-3. It was 11-3 or 10-4. So yeah, both good teams. I'm going to pick the New York Empire, mainly because, defense. I would say defense wins championships. Number 1 defense in the East every single year. So I don't expect much out of them this year. And Ottawa, I have to go off of last year's stats because they haven't played. Ottawa, they had a hard time against New York most time last year. Had a hard time scoring, as most teams do, unless you're Toronto. So I picked New York to win this game. So I'm predicting New York start 1-0, Ottawa 0-1. I see Ottawa putting up a fight, but I think New York will take this one, tire out their offense, and win with defensive breaks. And then they're going to DC, which honestly sucks for Ottawa because, you're coming off of a very defensive game when it comes to New York. And then the next day you're going to DC. The battle of the capitals, as they say, Ottawa, capital of Canada, and DC, capital of the United States. Frankly, DC did pick up Goose Helton from the Wildfire from last season. So Goose Helton, a 2-time MVP in his own right, will be playing for the DC Breeze. Every single year he's taken his team to the playoffs, Indianapolis, Chicago Wildfire, and now he's with DC. I expect DC to pull out the win. So I'm picking DC to win this one. Ottawa, I see them playing out a good game. I know DC swept a series with them last year. DC almost had a playoff chance last year, but came up just short. So I see DC winning this game. I cannot put a point differential on any of them. However, I just feel it bad for Ottawa. You know, they're gonna have a defensive struggle when it comes to the Empire, and then to come into after that, they have to go to DC. They're not gonna have much time to rest, and they're gonna be away on both of these games. I don't see them pulling out a victory. They might, but I just don't see it happening. I'm sorry, Ottawa. I'm just gonna say you guys are gonna go 0-2 to start off. You might be able to bounce back. You know, you're a consistent team, but I don't think it's happening this week.
So that's about it for our episode this week. Make sure you tune in next Tuesday to find out our Week 2 review. So from here at the studio, good night.